This episode of the Flush Podcast is brought to you by Onyx Hunt, Marshwear Clothing, Walton's, Aluma Trailers, and by Hoxie Native Seeds. Today we're having our own State of the Union habitat conversation with the big shots here at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. My guests are Marilyn Vetter, President and CEO, Bob St. Pierre, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, and Ron Leathers, Chief Conservation Officer. We'll discuss the state of our favorite habitat organization, new partnerships, what's ahead this year and beyond, celebrating 20 years of Quail Forever, a Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic preview, plus a few hard-hitting listener questions, and maybe some trivia too. Welcome to another episode of the Flush Podcast. I'm Travis Frank. Big Al is our producer. Welcome to The Roost. This has officially been titled The Roost. So this is now our third video podcast. Obviously, if you're listening audio, we still produce the same audio podcast. But the first episode aired just a little over a week ago, and our first listener comment was, you should call that The Roost, which makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of like you, Bob. We record on the road regularly. But when we're back here, it does feel like that makes total sense to call this The Roost. We have a couple things on the wall. We got our Dog Life members over there.
Makes us happy.
A couple of trophy birds. This is actually Howard Vincent's bird.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what Scott told me. That's great.
Right. And I've been making fun of Scott because it's the shortest tail feather in the office here. I've got a few of mine over there. Some memorabilia there, but I do appreciate the three of you all making time to come in and really hammer out a good conversation about the state of our favorite habitat organization. Marilyn, you have been here before. Bob, no stranger as well, but Ron Leathers, this is our first conversation recording. You and Bob have had what I believe to be one of the best biology conversations that I've listened to on pheasant and quail hatching. So we're going to get into a little bit of some corrections, maybe I'll call it.
Reproduction? We're going to talk reproduction.
Reproduction. We'll get into that in a little bit because I've had a lot of guests on over the years and I've asked questions, and sometimes the questions, as some of our listeners have pointed out, aren't answered accurately based on what's really happening with the birds. You have a lot of history with the birds. Let's start with you, Ron. Your title is Chief Conservation Officer. You've been with the organization the exact same amount of time as Mr. Bob St. Pierre here back in 2003.
Yeah.
January 6th,
Long time
2003, ago. Approximately, 8:01 a.m.
Right. Bob probably walked in the door before me, so he's got seniority.
So technically, he's been here longer, right? Bob has.
We're like fraternal twins.
How do you get such a cool title, and how long have you had it?
Oh boy, I've been in this role for about 3 years. It is a cool title, but people still think I'm going to show up and check their license when I say I'm the Chief Conservation Officer. So you gotta clarify a little bit. But yeah, starting about 3 years ago, we created this Chief Conservation Officer role, and it's been an awesome opportunity. It really helps us leverage all of our mission priorities against each other. It's just a lot of fun.
Can you sum it up? If somebody says, what would you say you do there, Ron?
Right. Yeah. That's a good question. We've got 4 primary mission pillars, and, Marilyn might get into strategic planning a little bit later, but my job is to make sure that those 4 work together. So habitat, access, advocacy, and education, and making sure that we're hitting all of those mission pillars through the 450 folks that we have in the conservation operations team.
So you oversee all of them?
I do. Not directly.
Okay.
There's a lot of state coordinators and directors and vice presidents that help make all that work happen. My job is just to set some direction for all those folks.
And Marilyn, is your job to keep him on task?
A little bit. No, it's quite honestly, I think when I think of Ron's role, it's almost like the chief deployment officer. They're really making sure that the mission comes to life there. And so when Ron and I work together, it's like, how are those things actually playing out in the field? And the rest of us in the organization are really trying to support that work. Yeah. Their mission delivery.
I think our listeners, just like on the Wing podcast, your listeners, Bob, they all want the same thing. The most birds possible. on the landscape at the end of the day, because we're all a bunch of bird hunters here. And you guys are all a bunch of bird hunters too. You want the exact same thing. And, we got to spend some time together, you and your husband, Clyde, out in North Dakota, where your story really began. You were kind enough to let us get a glimpse of what that looks like too. And ever since then, when the conversations have come up about your role, and I was like, guys, she wants it as bad as we all do. And as a leader of an organization, to know that, I think it's important. I really do. You just celebrated 2 years as the president and CEO. And I feel like the organization has never been healthier. Would you agree with that? Do you feel the same way, or should I ask Bob?
I was going to say, maybe you should ask my board.
Yeah.
I would tell you that I think maybe never felt more cohesive.
Okay.
And that's just because our team has worked really hard because I think it's really easy to grow up in an organization that's super small. When you think about, we're only 43 years old. So it takes a while for you to get to a size where all of a sudden you go, oh, those silos are no longer communicating. And that's what we've really worked hard on over the last 2 years, is how do we make sure that the horizontal is as healthy as the vertical? So maybe that's the difference, is that we have witnessed it in ourselves of like, oh, Ron's group has to know exactly what Bob's group is doing. And we've worked really hard at that and making sure our chapters are involved in that process, and our entire membership, by letting everybody see the strategic plan. Maybe that's why it feels a little closer to home to them.
Sure. I feel like I'm a member of the organization. I'm committed to the same mission. And so I feel like it's our organization, right? And you have all of these chapters around the country, and people volunteer their time. And I feel like, we just want to know, how are things doing? How are we doing as a whole? And do you guys ever get together in a group like this? And I suppose when you have board meetings, maybe that's a time when you gather. But do you guys ever just internally get together and have these conversations? Guys, how are we doing here?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. Yeah. As a leadership team, for sure. Mm-hmm. And we have an internal scorecard that we measure ourselves against.
Really? What does that look like?
Hopefully mostly green dots.
Right. Okay. Where would be a red dot then?
Sometimes it's been like during COVID, it was that membership engagement area where we couldn't get together, and that was a challenge. And every now and then you set a goal really high, because we don't want to sandbag. We want to make sure that we set goals that stretch us. And every now and then you might not have as many dollars raised, or maybe as many access acres as you really wanted to tie yourselves to. But by and large, at the end of the year, I mean, when I think about the last 2 years, that's been a sea of green, which means there's also more grass, more green side up. So every one of those parameters in the last 2 years, this team has just by far and away blown it out of the park. And so sometimes there's a little yellow until you get to the end of the year, but it's been phenomenal. I mean, it's amazing how these teams have delivered to what they held themselves accountable. Like, we're going to hit those goals, and they have, and they've surpassed them.
When you say these teams, are you talking individual chapters around the country, or your teams internally at Pheasants
I would say
Forever
the
and Quail
internal
Forever?
teams. So when I think about Bob's team, they have commitments on what they're going to deliver at Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, and from a marketing perspective, and how many social media, how is that going to grow? And Ron's team, of course, is acres, access, advocacy, and education, and all of that. And then the development team that is talking about, like, how many dollars are we going to raise, and how are we going to stretch ourselves? And of course, our internal administrative team of how do we make sure that we have an organization that is built to support these 600 people from a finance and HR perspective.
Right. Bob, you've been with the organization a couple minutes longer than Ron, so technically
the older twin.
You have seniority here. As you look at your journey here at Pheasants Forever, I mean, this might be a hard question to answer, but just like big picture. I mean, looking back at that day when you wore that hemp necklace.
When I was 12 years old and started.
The hemp necklace.
Right. Yep. And to where you are today. I mean, can you describe that journey? And do you feel like you're pleased with how it's evolved?
Well, I wouldn't be here 22 plus years if I wasn't pleased. But, so I'll answer that, kind of wrap that question all up into a ball and answer it a couple different ways. So you asked if we're as healthy as we've ever been, and I would say absolutely better than ever. As you know, like I worked for Howard for 20 years.
Yep.
I love Howard. I was honored to be the MC of his retirement party, right? I
Yeah.
love Howard. I'd run through a wall for Howard. And Marilyn has been everything and more. You know, I've run through a wall for Marilyn. Things are, because I get asked this question all the time. I was asked at Michigan State meeting. Like, you know, our chapters get together in different states and they're like, you know, how are things going? Is everything all right? Like, yeah. The organization's never been better. Revenue, acres, membership, every single metric. Like the red dot, we don't have a farm bill, you know, so it's not like all Nerf world and candy canes. Things aren't perfect, but from an organizational health and momentum and energy, you know, the other thing, you know, Ron, so we have the 2 finalists to replace Howard in Marilyn and Ron, right?
Mhm.
And we have the 2 finalists out of a nationwide search sitting 1 and 2 in this organization, and they work together absolutely seamlessly with respect and energy and drive. And how could you ask for anything even more? And the unsung hero in the organization, and I think you all would agree, the MVP that's not sitting here is our CFO, James
Absolutely.
Kerber. It's a name that people don't necessarily know, but he's the most valuable person and nobody really knows his name.
Okay, well, explain it then. Why? Why is he the MVP?
He's the glue. I mean, every team has a person that just keeps things moving and creates harmony and is just wonderful as a human being and intellectually the top of the class, right?
For sure.
I mean, you reported to
I
James
did.
for a long time.
Yeah, I worked for James for 15 years.
And he, you know, no aspiration to be the president and CEO because he is in the absolute perfect place in the organization. And I mean,
He is.
the most trusted, valuable person we have, and most people don't even know his name. And but you put all these people together, and you do have, you know me, baseball guy. You have the all-star pitcher. Right, it's the Cy Young winner. You got the MVP of biology. We have a wonderful, absolutely harmonious working. And again, it's not Nerf World and candy canes.
Sure,
we duke it out, right? We
Yeah.
don't always see eye to eye, but we all live this organization and live this lifestyle. We have bird dogs at home.
Mhm.
We spend our vacation time chasing those bird dogs on the places that everybody else listening, the public lands and the private lands that we want to create for habitat. So we bleed this organization.
Last week, I asked our listeners, what will you remember from this hunting season? Short little video. I filmed it right here, posted on our social media page, and people started telling us their stories. So the entire episode was just me sharing the stories from listeners, and we had great ones. So I want to ask you, maybe Marilyn, I'll start with you. What will you remember from this hunting season?
No, these guys know it's an easy one for me. Clyde and I spent 10 days in Montana, and it was our last morning, and we were in a vast, vast prairie that was central part of the state. So it was a lot of sage, not a lot of grass, but it was beautiful vistas. And we took our 2 old girls, 9 years old, out. By then, they're little, the edge is worn off. And we walked for 3 hours and we hit every species of prairie bird.
Really?
And the work was flawless. Never said a word other than fetch. And it was probably my most idyllic hunt ever.
Oh, mountain vistas in the distance. Bob, how about you? What will you remember from this hunting season?
So last year, 2 years ago, we created this concept, Opening Day. It's a film series. I'm going to do one a year.
Mhm.
And last year was with the captain, Billy Hildebrand, who do radio with.
Yep.
The series or episode we filmed this year was with my parents. So I went back to the UP for Opening Day of rough grouse hunting with a camera. And my brother met us there, and I got to spend opening morning with my mom, my dad, my brother, my bird dogs, and my wife, hunting some places I grew up, kind of my origin story. And, put the camera, talking to my mom and my dad. And, you see the video, you're like, I'm turning into my dad. It's like everything from the belly to my mannerism. But it was just magical. As you know, opening day of rough grouse season. So in Michigan,
A little thick and green.
it's September 15th. Doesn't matter the day, and it's thick and green. And I walked into the woods and I came out 5 for 5, 4 for 4 on rough grouse, and 1 for 1 on woodcock.
You did not.
Wow.
And you've seen me. You witnessed my shooting, and I'm very average, right? But
You're above average, Bob. Come on, don't put yourself down like that.
But I
You
walked
seriously
out.
went 5 for 5?
I went 5 for 5 on opening, and we only hunted for like 2 hours because it was
Were you just
90
were you
degrees.
strutting like a timber doodle
I
when you
couldn't
came
believe-
out?
Now, granted, there were birds that were getting.
I would have, man.
There's
5 for
video.
5.
We'll find out.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch this now.
They were pointed, but even pointed birds in the woods
Yeah.
on opener, you can't.
Absolutely.
And I'd come out. I put my mom and dad on the road, an easier walk, and they're in their 70s, and my brother and I were just bushwhacking. And, dog went on point, bird flushed, bird came down, and I'd come out to the road to do the little talk with and it was like 1, 2, 3, like, I can't explain it, Dad.
Drop the
He's
mic.
never been so proud of his son, has he?
Yeah.
Oh,
so-
my goodness. Well,
Then my dad said that. He's like, I taught him how to shoot.
I taught him everything he
and
knows.
if you've ever hunted
Yeah.
with my dad, it's like he hits like 1 grouse a year.
How often do you get back home to hunt with your family like that?
You go home for one of those and you realize not enough.
Yeah.
There was a time there, every opener, I made it back home to hunt with mom and dad. And my mom,
Does she carry a shotgun?
she does. She didn't on this hunt. She's got arthritis and she just had.
Dang it.
But she grew up carrying. I like to say my mom was the original woman on the wing.
Oh,
just
the
in my
OG.
own hunt.
Yes.
I like that.
But that's so my mom is as influential to my hunting as my dad.
I can't wait to see that. When is it coming out?
It'll be September this year, September 2025.
Gotcha. Ron, do you?
6-month wait? Is that what you're telling
Yeah,
us?
I'm teasing.
So excited.
That's the long tease.
Yep. I don't know if you can top that, but
Yeah, thanks for putting me last on
yeah,
this. I
sorry
really
about
appreciate
that. I
that.
didn't know we were going to hit the
Idyllic
heartstrings.
vistas, heartstrings, and no missed shots. What'd you do this year, Leathers?
I'm pretty sure he didn't remain perfect for the rest of the
You
season.
got that right.
I had a new puppy this year. I got a new pup last year, and then I had some foot surgery last year, so I didn't get to do much hunting last year. So I was convinced to get that bird dog his first bird this year, and did it on public land in Minnesota. 2 weeks into the season, so had hunted a piece of property that we bought when I was in my old job, which cataloged and worked on a lot of those public pieces of property. And I thought, I'll go out to this place. I know where there's birds. And
So you helped put habitat on the ground
Well,
there.
I worked on that project. We saw it through on the purchase and the restoration, and I thought I'm gonna go check
Sweet.
it out. So went out, walked around on that piece of property, moved a couple hands, and then got, the place that I expected there to be a rooster. There was a rooster, and I missed it. I fanned on it, and
Perfect.
I said some words I probably shouldn't have said, but I was there alone, and my dog didn't mind.
Yeah.
But we left that place, went to pick up the evening at another spot, and he put a good trail on a bird, and man, 100 yards down the road, it popped up, and I hammered it, and so he got to bring back his first. I think Marilyn got a lot of pictures. We send a lot of pictures back and forth when our pups do good work.
Yeah.
But good opportunity for him to get it both on public land, 2 pieces of public property on the opener. So.
Was it a Vetter puppy?
No.
No.
No?
Mine
Mine don't have that much hair.
Yeah, I've got. I run golden retrievers. And
Okay, gotcha.
He's an 18-year-old or 18-month-old maniac, but he's a good pup.
Gotcha. If anybody wants to hear a little bit more about your story, Marilyn, you came on a year and a half ago or 2 years ago at the start of your new role as president and CEO, and we dug into your story. We also filmed your story for the television show last season, And our episodes are done airing on the Outdoor Channel. So people that have been reaching out to us, excuse me, the episodes are done airing on the Outdoor Channel, but now they're starting to stream on our YouTube channel, and they will be there forever to watch in their entirety, including your story.
Cool. They can watch me miss for eternity.
Well,
that's fantastic.
We all miss, but it makes everybody feel better. I've missed
Humility
more.
is a good thing.
I think, Marilyn, I have missed more birds on television than
probably anyone. Yeah.
Maybe all of us put together because of
because you're on film all the time.
All the time. The pressure is always there, and the camera always seems to just perfectly be in the position for my misses, and so they always get put in. Even if I say, "Can we not put all of them?" They find a way to fit them in there. No, but it's just really a great story. And then afterwards, this year, you sent me a text this spring, and you have been working through eyesight changes that are affecting your shot. So what have you learned in the last, 8 months probably since you've really started tackling this?
Another reason that aging really sucks
Yeah.
is that everybody tells me it's just the process of your eyes changing and how challenging it is. But it has been really challenging because I'll have one gun fitter say, "Oh man, you're totally right eye dominant," and literally the next one will say, "No, you're left eye dominant." And then my ophthalmologist says, "No, you're right eye dominant." So I think for me, I need to get a gun, which I have on order, that will fit me well. And then it's just practice, and relearn the comfort zone because I'm in my head now when I shoot.
Yeah.
And so it's getting the fit right and then practicing and getting used to that being my appendage and not being, there was a while, and everybody knows as Clyde shoots turkey loads on almost everything. And it's
He
because
is lethal.
he is.
Your husband
and he
is
doesn't
lethal.
need to because he is lethal, but he had me shoot him for a while. And I think it made me really flinchy because they
really
they
kick like a
hammer you
mule.
hard.
Yeah.
And I think that really was the root of the beginning of it for me. And now I'm having to get better at following through. And I think it really made me pretty flinchy.
So do you feel like your shot improved this season with some of the things you learned about your eyesight?
It did somewhat. It did.
Okay.
And I'm excited about getting a new gun this summer and being able to practice at the range and do some clay and sporting clays and hopefully get a little more comfortable again for next fall.
Right on. Maybe Bob, Mr. 5 for 5, could offer a few
teach me.
tips there. Okay. So
We'll do private instructions.
there's a lot happening internally, a lot at the organization. But one thing that I have noticed and really wondered are these press releases that I've seen over the last year. And an example would be, let's see if I can find one here. Announcements on your social media page or news releases. Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever sign memorandums of understanding with organizations like the Rough Grouse Society. And then I think it was maybe a week or two ago with the Department of Agriculture. What do these memorandums of understanding mean for the big picture? What is this?
Everybody's looking at me.
All right, take it, Ron.
Yeah, so an MOU is effectively a paper handshake at the end of the day, right? It's a little bit of a nothing burger, but it gives us an opportunity to agree at the highest levels of our organizations to work together. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're working with the federal government or you're working with another large NGO, it's helpful to say, look, Marilyn and RGS's CEO have agreed we're gonna work together. At the field level, when we hand that off to our biologists that sit in a field in, you name it, in Louisiana, right? They may work on a piece of private property. That MOU lets them cross that fence. And so then they can cross right across the fence from the private property, keep working on the Fish and Wildlife Service piece of property. And then they get into a little bit of timber where maybe you've got some woodcock habitat and they can just high five in RGS and they can come in and work on that piece of property. And then you get over into, the next piece of property. So it really gives us the opportunity to just keep going and keep building on those habitat complexes and not to have to go through that repetitive process every single time of saying, this is what we're attempting to do. Because we've already done that at the highest levels.
I envision Marilyn walking into the office, slamming a door and say, listen here, this is how this is going to be. Are we on the same page here? I don't know why. That's how every time I see one of these, I'm like, "Got a girl, Marilyn. You did it again." Are you the one? Are you the one signing these deals?
Well, I end up signing them, but we all end up living them. And it's interesting. So when you asked the other day that you might want to talk about this, I printed them all out, put them beside each other just to like compare them. And it's funny that the three most common words are collaboration, partnership, and training leaders and talent in the field. And those are really some of the primary categories that we think about. Is we all struggle with getting young and emerging talent into our organizations. And so we train together. We maximize our resources. Our resources in this space are finite and they can be challenging sometimes. So if we can sit down with RGS and do a burn session together, teaching people prescribed fire to landowners and to our own internal team, that's fantastic. Why wouldn't we make use of those resources? And it makes it easier then. So if I'm a state coordinator in South Carolina, I inherently know who should I invite first of my partners. So Fish and Wildlife Service, RGS, and everyone else along the way. But I think, like Ron said, it makes it easier for our field team to say, these are the people that we know we're going to prioritize first. And when you're that far away from headquarters, it's a pat on the back to say, you got it, you can do it, and feel empowered.
So I just mentioned two of them, RGS and Department of Agriculture. You said you went and you looked back. Do you have the list handy by chance? How many of these organizations have you partnered with in the last 12 months?
Well, officially, it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We just also finished. And we're going to sign one on Monday with the National Association of Conservation Districts as well.
Really?
The Department of Agriculture one is all four agencies and the department itself. So
that's
a 3-in-1.
Yep. Natural Resources Conservation Service. I didn't go with an acronym right off the way, Bob. The Farm Service Agency, the Forest Service, and the Department of Interior.
Gotcha.
And those are big deals, right? You think about Forest Service.
Second largest landowner in the country at the U.S. Forest Service. NRCS is really the gateway to conservation on private lands in this country and the largest recipient of conservation funding through the Farm Bill of any of the federal agencies. And the Farm Service Agency provides service to those landowners. So you're talking access to an awful lot of people that have conservation goals and potentially could create habitat.
And you think U.S. Forest Service, and then that layers with RGS, right? Woodcock, bobwhites, rough grouse.
It's a new year, but some things stay the same, like the onX Hunt app being one of the most valuable hunting tools I take into the field every single day. I'd feel lost without it, both literally and figuratively. The app is a compass that's ideal for us bird hunters. It shows our position on planet Earth and the land boundaries. It also shows us information about crops and fields and tree covers. You can use the app in CarPlay and Android Auto. You can look at land in 3D to understand terrain. You can create your own trails, check weather, add waypoints, send your location to friends, scout property, find landowners, create your own diary of successful hunts, and so much more. They are also huge supporters of the best conservation organizations in North America, and onX is always working to create more publicly accessible places for you and I to hunt. What's not to love about the app? The onX Hunt app is awesome. Try it for free for yourself at onxhunt.com. If you're one of the lucky hunters that harvested your own tasty wild game this hunting season, then I want to personally congratulate you on your success. Well done. And if you want to make the most of all that hard-earned meat, then I recommend you head over to waltons.com. They have everything but the meat. That's their motto. They have all the tools to help you process and prepare your meat, like grinders, mixers, stuffers, slicers, smokers, grills, and seasonings. They have thousands of items in stock and ready to ship the same day. They've also recently launched their own dry curing cabinet and a whole line of chambered vacuum sealers, from large commercial-grade sealers to smaller handheld models. And let me tell you, they are awesome. This year, John Tremblay and his team at Waltons are really focused on adding new content to their Meatgistics library to help all of us hunters make the most of our meat. All of that can be found at waltons.com, and you can listen to their own weekly Meatgistics podcast too. I'm happy to call the hardworking team at Waltons my friends, and I believe they will treat you like one if you choose to trust them with your own meat processing needs. Find everything they have to offer at waltons.com. Marshmart Clothing is one of the hottest clothing brands in the outdoors today. Marshwear designs clothing for the pursuit of good times in the outdoors. Their lineup is versatile, from field to hunt camp to a night out on the town. They have field staples like the Wheeler jacket and long haul pants, and everyday classics like the Sullivan Tech hoodie. Marshwear clothes are designed to keep you looking and feeling your best while you're in the uplands and on everyday adventures. They also have some of the coolest camo patterns on the market today, conceived from an amalgamation of vintage camo patterns from previous generations. Their mallard camo harkens back to the classics of old camouflage, but with a modern day twist. I'm a big fan of their style, fit, and quality. All Marshwear clothes are field tested and approved for the pursuit of good times in the outdoors. Check them out at marshwearclothing.com. At the end of the day, I believe all of these organizations want the same thing: the best habitat, clean water. We all want that. And sometimes I wonder, why can't we just form one massive habitat organization, America's Habitat Organization or something, and really fight hard? Does that ever cross your mind? I mean, you're signing these handshakes, right? Are we getting maybe big picture or too big of a picture, but is there ever a point where we can all come into the same room and sit down, or are you already doing this with these other organizations?
Definitely sitting in the same room.
Yeah, we've sort of done that. I mean, there's different balance sheets for each one of these different entities, but at the end of the day, we sit down, we have conversations through our partnerships in Washington, D.C. about what we want to do, who we want to be as a community. There's a broad community of conservationists out there and conservation organizations that work together really, really well.
Yeah.
We always say, we don't compete for conservation because there's more resource needs than we can possibly address. That's true. So everybody has their expertise, and we let each of those folks worry about what they do best.
What's the biggest strength by being able to sign these deals? Is it in Washington, D.C.?
It depends on the entity, right?
Yeah.
So for most of the MOUs that we have, I think a lot of it is legislative or policy work. But the speed that you're able to work and the comfort that you can give to folks that Marilyn pointed out that may be a long ways away from headquarters or a USDA field office that's a long ways from Washington, D.C., there's some comfort for that person to be able to know that this aligns with what their leadership is already saying and that latitude to be able to go do that work.
Sure.
So your question is the most powerful piece in Washington, D.C. I think the answer in Ron's answer, the answer is furthest away from Washington, D.C. It's on the ground at the local level where biologist Jane from RGS can talk with biologist Jesse from PF and let's work together and create woodcock and bobwhite quail habitat. And we got this document that says we have a green light to go do it.
Are you seeing it? Sorry to jump in, Marilyn, but are you seeing it? Can you have examples of two different biologists from your organization and another one implementing this now?
Particularly, I think in the eastern corridor where our woodcock comes through, and those chapters are so excited about it, and so are our staff. And that, in fact, when I talked to Ben Jones, the CEO of RGS, it was one of those things that he was like, we started looking at why are our populations increasing in these areas? And they're like, because if they radio collared them, well, they were coming, and when they were migrating, they were hitting QF properties, and they were like, that was one of those eureka moments of maybe we should formalize this so that they know where we are working, and we can also know where their needs are. So we can align those resources, and I would say that's a great example of a geography where the light bulb went off. And it was interesting after we announced that MOU, because internally we felt like it wasn't that much of a big deal because we had already been working together. I can't tell you how many members I heard from on both sides, PF and RGS, about this is so cool.
Yes.
And it allowed them to say, I want to also join RGS, or RGS members said, I want to join PF because I want to support that collaboration. And we forget sometimes that people don't know that we work together, or Adam Putnam and Nick Wiley and Ron and I talk quite a bit from Ducks Unlimited because, as Ron likes to give them a bad time, that ducks are grassland birds too.
They certainly are.
And we work together all the time, but I don't think people know that. So in some ways, just letting people know that we already collaborate in the space is really important.
So my circle of hunters were really excited, and I'm not going to name any names, but they were just excited about that particular one with RGS because they felt like they just really felt like the work that PF and QF have been doing has been really solid. And they want that for the forest, the birds that they love to hunt too. And it was just like a fist pump. Maybe something is going to move. Something different is going to happen. And I don't want to put down efforts from RGS. I don't want to put them down. But I will say that the response that I heard was just my hunting buddies feeling like, all right, this is good. There's something good happening here. I just wondered what tangibly is happening and what can we talk about to celebrate and say, this is an example and there's more coming.
Yeah, and I think the natural tendency, you hear that, PF and RGS, human nature is like, oh, they're going to do a bunch of stuff in Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Well, the reality is this was somewhat born out of a blend between quail and woodcock, which we've brought up a couple times, where the biggest momentum is Indiana, Pennsylvania, Michigan, where these relationships to do habitat work that Ron was talking about, where they're doing bobwhite quail habitat work with our biologists. And like, you know what? Woodcock are going to use this in Indiana migrating through, right? And that's where we've seen the fastest growth. Minnesota, we've already been working with Rough Grouse Society we're based here. I think it's their number 1 or number 2 state, RGS. So, we've been done all sorts of projects with RGS in Minnesota, Sharp-tailed Grouse Society, Prairie Chicken Society. We have as many partnerships in Minnesota where people kind of thought this MOU was based. That's already like 20 years old. We've been doing land acquisitions with all these entities. The MOU was a little bit more focused on bobwhite quail and woodcock to help all of us more heading into the east and southeast.
How much of your time, Marilyn, do you spend focused on Quail Forever versus Pheasants Forever? Or is it in your mind just one?
So if you think about it from a organization, like a legal organization, you could say it's one. I would say that internally, and we try to live that, but when you talk about geographically, they're very different. And so we know the needs are different. I would say I really split my time mostly from a development perspective. So when we talk about from an organizational perspective, we think about it as a unified force. If we're going to do team development, we're going to do it across both organizations. But when I think about development, I probably spend more time in quail because it's newer.
I was going to say, because it's so young, it's
and
still growing.
We're new to them.
Yeah.
And so it's important for them in the Southeast and actually now in the Southwest and the Deep South to be more familiar with Quail Forever. And so I would say I spend more time from a development perspective, outreach, fundraisers, those kinds of events in quail country.
Would you say the same, Bob and Ron, for you? Or
Definitely, I spend a lot more time in quail country these days just because of the maturity of the organization. Pheasants is... we've developed a process over the last 40 years, and we know pheasant country really, really well. We've got some incredible people on the team that have been doing good things in pheasant country for 20, 30, 40 years. That quail country is the growth area, and so that's what needs more of my attention.
So you're celebrating 20 years at Quail Forever this year. Officially would be August, September, or something like that, if I remember?
August 5th, 2005. August 5th or August 10th. I'm getting those.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's Pheasants Forever's birthday is one, and Quail Forever's birthday is the other.
So it's a very worthy accomplishment to be celebrating. How are you going to celebrate this year? And maybe a second question to that would be, what is the best accomplishment or something that you're most proud of as the organization as a whole? Or of the organization as a whole over the 20 years.
Yeah. So hopefully you got your the new issue of the Quail Forever Journal in your mailbox, and that's the kickoff to the 20th anniversary year. And we have just a beautiful cover who is a find from Maryland. That Maryland found this artist. She's in Oklahoma, right?
All the quail.
It's all the quail.
It's so cool.
6 different species of quail, and she has in the painting she used soil, right, from each of the regions of those 6 species in the paint.
Yeah, she made her own pigments.
And it's just a breathtaking image painting on the cover that's also part of our banquet package for the year ahead. And when you get to Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, that's going to be part of signage, and the original is going to be part of the auction at Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic. So
don't tell anybody.
we know somebody.
Is the original?
We know somebody that's going to be a bidder on it.
Okay.
So we're trying to boost the price.
They're trying to put me into bankruptcy, so I have to
Marilyn's
buy
starting to bid on it.
You-
Well, Bob, let's talk more about this, shall we?
So the 20th anniversary year is kicked off with that issue. We've got some content online that celebrates the 20th. And then the embodiment of the celebration is going to happen in Kansas City with first time ever, we have a quail stage on the show floor. Every half hour, there's a different session focused on quail habitat, quail hunting, different quail-oriented things. And it's not just bobwhites, right? It's merns, it's scalies.
Yeah, I'm going to talk on that. I think that might be the stage because is there like a public land quail hunting session?
There is. There is. Yep.
So
And then
I don't know.
I think we're on the podcasters stage together, or podcasters panel on that stage too.
Okay, cool.
So and then our keynote speaker, Clay Newcomb from Meat Eater.
Yeah, he's from down south, right?
He is. And most people are like, why is he speaking?
Mhm.
You know, isn't he? He's the bear guy, right?
Yeah.
And it's true, but his origin story starts with quail. His whole life story in the hunting and conservation world begins with a story about quail. And I'm not going to give it away, but that's going to be a signature component. And as well as we'll have right in front of him on the Saturday night dinner, there'll be our 20th anniversary Quail Forever film, which Ryan Sparks, the editor of QF Journal, and our film team went to Missouri and filmed with our chapter in St. Louis, which was chapter number 1 for QF.
Very cool.
And that story
Was that back at Ryan's farm? Or his home?
No, because Ryan's farm is in Nebraska.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
So all sorts of different angles related to National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic will be kind of the celebration moment for QF.
Well, I feel like Donnie Vincent last year at the banquet, like that to me, he just raised the bar so high. Marilyn, and I told you afterwards, I was like this. I was leaning in, listening. I don't often lean in to listen, but the way he told those stories, I just caught myself like with a grin and leaning in. It was fantastic. And the whole room, I don't know, like 1,500 people sitting in there, and everybody was just totally into his story. So
it was the most well-behaved QF audience I have ever seen.
Agreed.
It was so quiet.
Yes.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, you gave a great speech too at the banquet that night. It was a really well done banquet, and I don't know, I wasn't ready to talk Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic yet, but since we are, do you guys have any openings left for the Saturday night banquet, or is it sold out?
Saturday night banquet's sold out, which is cool. But one of the questions that I don't want to let drop, you asked me a moment ago, like, what's the biggest like milestone for QF in the 20 years, things that we're super proud of. And obviously a lot of habitat acres, but where my mind went to is Ron's team, and the makeup of Ron's team, I think, will shock many listeners related to Quail Forever.
Yeah, we are almost exactly half and half Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever staff right now. So you've got a 40-year organization that has a couple hundred staff members, and you've got a 20-year organization that has the same number of staff members. And I think the perception that's out there is that Quail Forever is the little brother or the second child here, the much smaller second child. That's not the case. The footprint probably is larger.
You think of quail country, and it's a lot bigger than pheasant country.
26 states.
Yep, 32 if you include
the Western.
all the Western quail states. So fairly significant portion of the country is quail country.
Fastest growing organization, right? Conservation organization would be Quail Forever in America.
I would guess.
You know,
depends
anybody can make that statement depending on what statistics.
numbers
Yeah,
mean.
okay.
I mean, in terms of number of employees, growth of membership, number of acres that are being put on the ground, like Quail Forever, whether or not that distinction is true compared to what other entity, Quail Forever is a rocket ship, and it's growing fast, and it's something that we're all super proud of because we've been part of it since its beginnings.
One of the things that I would add to the thing that we probably easy to overlook because it's not a measurable outcome is I can think about 2 years ago when I would be at an event in Deep South, let's say Florida, or if I'd be in Arizona. And the common theme was, it's too late. Why are we thinking about this? Like bobwhites in the Southeast are gone. There's nothing I can do about it. There is no hope for wild birds. And I'm not saying that the plantation heritage is not valuable. It's a wonderful thing, but it is not a gateway for a lot of folks that would normally be DIY hunters.
Yeah, it
is. It's a very exclusive arena, and it's a fabulous part of this nation's heritage, but it isn't for everyone. And I can tell you in 2 years how different it feels. How different it feels when people now, like, their eyes light up and say, we want to do a Bawa project in South Carolina. That's awesome. Or we want to do one in Georgia or Florida. And they're excited.
Who are these people? Are these people that live there?
Chapters and people that live there. And now they're establishing chapters like, wow, they feel empowered. No different than the Arizona Quail Initiative. When I first went to Arizona 2 years ago, the thought was, if it doesn't rain, there's no birds. There's nothing we can do for it. And now people are like, well, wait a minute. We can have an impact. How do we re-wet the sponge in places? How do we work with cattlemen and ranchers in those areas to make sure that there's room for conservation on their properties? It has changed how people feel about hope for quail, I think. It is probably, for me, the most exciting is that people feel like they can make a difference instead of waiting for Mother Nature to make a difference.
Well, a couple weeks ago, I was in Oklahoma, and we're walking these big, massive parcels of land, and you can see habitat work being done in cutting cedars. You can also see the grazing practices. That's huge. The grazing practices and what that affects the land and how people really can manage wildlife habitat based on, because grazing is good when it's done correctly, but it can also really just devastate the grass and the native plants that are on there. And so you'll see these fence lines, and on one side, it's just grazed down, and on the other side, it just is like I'm entering a different world over here, and suddenly there goes some deer, and there goes a coyote, and there's a covey over here that just gets up, and there's another covey over here, and so obviously that information is out there for people. It's just a matter of who's going to implement it. How are you going to take care of your herd on your own land? What are you going to do maybe differently if you want birds, if that's important to you or not too? So, I mean, some people are doing it. Some people aren't doing it. And that's a reality too.
I would say that's our biggest success. So, to build on what Bob had you'd asked kind of what the biggest success of Quail Forever is. Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever together have the largest core of biologists of any organization in the country. So we have more wildlife biologists than anybody else, and they work with those landowners to help them do that. Because you're right, without the cow, you're not going to have bobwhite. Just if you let that
cow
grass,
plus fire,
cow plus fire is good.
Cow plus fire.
If you let that grass just grow, it gets so thick underneath there, the chicks can't run underneath it. You're just not going to have bobwhite. Mm-hmm. So,
but
our
also
biologists are helping those producers.
It grazed too far. I mean, It's just like there's this perfect balance.
Yeah, you've got to figure out what that grass can tolerate from a grazing regime that's going to maintain that level of cover for those nesting birds. But that's the beauty of this organization is we have such talent out in the field that knows how to work with producers, knows how to balance their economic needs with their conservation needs, and then has the tools and the resources to be able to put them in the ground. It's an incredible success story.
You mentioned you have the most field biologist reps out there of any organization in
More
America.
wildlife biologists than any organization in America except the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
And are you growing still? Are you guys adding?
If you look at our website, there's probably 20 posted positions right now.
Where are they at?
Oh, all across the country.
Really?
All across. The quail country is our fastest growing area. Anywhere from Texas to North Carolina. Anywhere in between there, we always have positions posted for.
I assume it has a criteria of what you might need to be hired on each of those positions. But I mean, I constantly see on social media, hey, we're hiring for this, or hey, we're hiring for that. And before we turn the microphone on, a friend of ours that was your social media manager, Nate Akey, he's been on this show before too, but he recently took a different position. And then when you guys released this announcement, in 5 hours, you had how many applicants?
Well, so 5 days.
Oh, 5 days.
5 days, we had 500 applicants.
Wow.
For the social media position.
That's cool.
We had to shut it down. Our HR department's like, we can't take more.
Yeah, and I got you in this room today because this way you don't have to sit through all those meetings, right?
Nice.
I'll be back for the second round interview.
There you go. Okay, so we touched on Farm Bill briefly. I made a mental note to go back to that and Grasslands Act. Those are two topics I want to touch. We'll get into Pheasant Fest Quail Classic because we've been all over the place here, but I'm trying to mentally make all these notes here.
I'm sorry, I've been riding shotgun with you, moving you in different directions.
It's all good. It's all good. I don't know why I have this open. I'm not even looking at it. So let's go back to Farm Bill. That could be an entire podcast, and it probably should. And you guys talk about this too on the Wing podcast as well. But where do we stand on the Farm Bill, and how do you guys feel about where we're at?
Yeah, so the Farm Bill has technically expired already, and then was extended for a year at the end of last year. So we're operating on a relatively old Farm Bill that has some good tools in it. Had some good tools in it, but we're up against some caps in some places that we don't want to be, right? We are against the CRP cap. We've got producer limitations on CRP payments that are limiting us, and just a number of things that we need to see fixes in the next Farm Bill for. So the political climate's a little difficult right now to get a whole lot done, but there is some interest in DC in making sure that Farm Bill gets done, and there's a lot of interest among the ag community who's really applying a ton of pressure on politicians right now to make some movement. Organizationally, geographically, we're in a great place here. So of the House and the Senate Ag committees, Minnesota is represented in leadership on both of them, with Angie Craig in the House and with Amy Klobuchar in the Senate. So we've got an opportunity to make some headway here. We've got some champions. They need a little bit of space and some time to get this bill written, but we know they've got to get something done here soon.
When would it be implemented? When is the next opportunity for a new Farm Bill to be signed?
Yeah, I mean, if they can pass it whenever they've got time. The legislative calendar is just full right now. Our guess is you're going to see them really trying to take something up this late spring or over the summertime and see if they can get something passed. There's some really good ideas out there that carried over from the last Congress. So, they've got a head start, and they've got an opportunity to do some things. It's just a matter of how much funding we can allocate to those programs and what the level of comfort is with, conservation programs in DC.
So just one, Ron mentioned the cap. We're up against the cap. And for general public, just breaking that down, that's really good news. What that means is the number of acres that are currently enrolled across the United States is at the maximum allowed. Not the maximum it's ever been. You think back to 06, 07, 08, when bird numbers were best of our lives, right?
Yep.
Better than our grandpas in some cases, right? That's when CRP was at 36.2 million acres. Right now it's at
24 is the cap, so we're just under that.
So good news is every possible acre has almost been enrolled. What's that say? Landowner demand is high.
Right.
Fist pump time, right? Because landowner demand drives that cap to be pushed up. Because when you think about rural America and soil rental rates and the fact that we're at the cap, now's a wonderful time to go into U.S. Senator and U.S. Representatives' offices and say, let's go. We need a new farm bill. We need to raise that cap because I can't get enrolled. And that's a big deal for the income of our rural American farmers and ranchers. So good news, but now the bad news is, we need an opportunity to open up for us.
Yeah, there's nothing to enroll in right now.
So Bob and I bought a piece of property out in western Minnesota. We couldn't enroll it in CRP if we wanted to.
Pretty limited. I mean, you could do some of the continuous practices that are small acre programs, but you're not going to get.
We want to go big. Ron. We want to go big.
Yes,
that's right.
Gonna struggle.
So if we wanted to enroll in a buffer strip, we could probably find acres to do that. But if we had a 40 or 60 acre Matt Kaharski property, right, that you and I did a show with Trampled on, right?
Yeah.
Not an opportunity for us.
Not right now.
Probably not going to have a general sign up this year.
Okay, so then somebody says, I'm a member of Pheasants Forever. I want to know that Pheasants Forever is pushing for this in DC. Do you have somebody? What does that look like?
We
right
do.
now?
We have a really talented government affairs team. I would say we've got one of the best government affairs teams of any organization out there. Ariel Wiegard is our vice president of government affairs. She was the one that I was on the phone with when I was walking through here before. Yeah, she's active and aggressive. And
a lot happening over there right now.
Lots happening over there right now. And then she's got a director, Andrew Schmidt, who maybe knows the Farm Bill better than the people that wrote it. I mean, so they're an incredible team, and they're fighting to take our message to DC every single day.
You feel like it's happening, Ron? You feel like it's going to happen? We're going to get a new Farm Bill?
Boy.
I mean, what does your gut say?
This is not the time to make predictions about things, Travis. I'd love to.
I'll let that be then.
So I'll grab the other question you asked about the Grasslands Act.
Yes.
And tie it back to one of your earlier questions. Like, you guys work together as other conservation groups. Grasslands Act is a wonderful example of us working together with all the conservation groups. So there is a conglomerate of 36 different groups, from World Wildlife Fund to the Ruffed Grouse Society, that get together once every 2 weeks and talk about how do we strategize around the North American Grasslands Act, Conservation Act, and how do we move this forward in DC and in the court of public opinion. And I lead the communications effort.
You do?
I lead that group for the communication side of it. Okay. And Katie McCaleb, the communications director with Ruffed Grouse Society, is on that call with me every single time, right? And National Wildlife Federation and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers and National Deer Alliance. And then there's a government affairs group that's, in parallel with the communications. So the government affairs group is calling the shots in DC to get things moving. And then our group is supporting the government affairs efforts to get the America's bird hunters and, mule deer hunters all in sync to move this forward and let our elected officials know this is important, to get media stories together. So a lot of times, I think, well, we're just competing against Ruffed Grouse Society or, these other groups. But particularly when it comes to advocacy, we are an arm in arm lockstep working on some of the same things. And it just may not be as obvious to the general hunter, but it's happening.
So I know you guys, I see this. I'm so entrenched in Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. Been so long. And I feel like you guys are just always, working and doing all this stuff. I don't know that many people internally at DU and, just some of these other, the Wild Turkey or you name a different one. I don't know them like I know you guys, and I see what you're doing, and we have these conversations. So I feel like I'm always, even if it's not recorded like we are today, we're talking about this stuff because we care so much about it. Is this stuff happening with the other organizations as well? Are they just as passionate? Are they fighting just as hard as you guys are?
Some of them have smaller teams, but when I think about Ariel's colleagues in DC, I mean, they're all together. DC, you have Ducks Unlimited for sure, Wild Turkeys. They're all playing a role. Every organization might have a different size of their team, but every one of them's at the table. They have to be. We have to have a consolidated effort in this.
So I feel like if we're going to battle, you've got the front line, you've got the backup, you've got machine. You know, like if you were to give an order as to who's doing what, you guys all have your different roles, but you really are all in the battle together, right?
For sure. Yep. We align a lot around policies that just do good work across the platform. You know, we're worried about the uplands. DU is worried about those wetlands that are integrated in the uplands because, again, ducks are grassland birds. In case Nick Wiley's listening. Anyway, but you know, you've got all the deer groups are occupying that same space, and the elk groups. I mean, just we're all aligned really well in Washington D.C.
So another example, right? Because your thought process here is not foreign, right? And people are like, God, do these ever talk to each other, right? Will Primos, right? Famous name.
See, that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed him going back in time and telling his story that you had with him. Well done on that one, Bob.
So Will made his name, you know, creating deer and turkey calls and duck calls.
Mm-hmm.
And he created these Purdy shotguns, one of ones, it consecutively numbered 4, 10, 28, 16, 12, or 20 and 12.
Yep.
And you know, he wants to donate them. And you'd think, well, he'll donate them to the National Wild Turkey Federation and they'll do great work for turkeys. And Will had the same thought process that your line of questioning is like, well, I want to use these guns to raise money and illustrate groups working together. So he's donated these shotguns, which have been evaluated by Rock Island Auction House at just shy of $1 million.
Wow.
Right. And rather than just donating it, where he's going to donate them for an auction,
Mm-hmm.
and the proceeds are going to go to Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, Ducks Unlimited, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, National Wild Turkey Federation, and Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. And it's going to be spread amongst those groups. In those groups, part of our responsibility is to promote it together in harmony and talk about how we do work together for the greater good of wildlife habitat. So the string you're pulling on is obviously people, the general public's wondering, like, are they the Yankees versus the Mets versus the Twins? Like, they all want to.
It's not that way.
It's not.
Yeah.
We are all working towards a common goal. Like, yeah, we have our favorite species, which is why each group exists. Like, you know, I love pheasants and quail, and I could take or leave turkeys. You know, I go turkey hunting to scout for the other birds I really care about. But right, but we all
come on. You hear that? You get the hair
but
on
I
the
get
back of your
more
neck
excited about a rooster cackling or a rough grouse drumming.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day,
You can have both at the same time.
And that's the point.
Yes,
That's the point. Again, you've probably heard me say it a million times. It's the web of life. We all learned it in 3rd grade, and when we got to 4th grade, we forgot about it. And when all these conservation organizations are working together, we're recreating the web of life that exists out on the landscape. You know, the pheasants and the quail and the wood ducks, they haven't forgotten about it. And that's kind of an illustration of these shotguns is to help tell that story.
So that is going to be auctioned off later this
December 2025.
Okay.
Rock Island, and we're going to promote the hell out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's not a whole lot of buying. Are you interested in $1 million, $2 million?
I would like to let people know that it is an option to purchase, but I do not quite have the funds to
He's
bid.
saving for that piece of property that you guys are going to buy.
Yes, or the print that Marilyn is going to try to take home.
And both the print and the shotguns will be at Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic. So if people want to see the shotguns, they will be on the show floor.
Locked up tight, I assume.
Well, yeah.
That's pretty cool that you're going to have.
Go Ocean's 11 on it if you want to get them out of there.
I bet. I actually did it. This is a different show and a different story, but yesterday I did a story with this guy in Minnesota that is world known to have one of the most expansive antique reel collections from one of the original reel manufacturers in the world. And I held the smallest reel I've ever seen in my hand. It's this big. I go, how much is this one? And he goes, $15,000. I go, I'm going to set that right here. I'm going to put that one right back down. Would you like to establish a native prairie? Whether it's a small patch of wildflowers or a large field of upland bird and wildlife habitat, there are a lot of questions that may arise. The what, when, how, and how much can actually be overwhelming. Our friends at Hoxie Native Seeds can help. Not only do they sell native seeds, with over 40 years of growing their own prairie, they're happy to consult for free on any of your native prairie needs. Family-owned and operated, Hoxie Native Seeds has provided countless acres of premium native habitat mixes sourced straight from their own fields in the heart of Iowa. For a free consultation, find them at hoxienativeseeds.com. If you're active in great outdoor adventures, then odds are good that you have gear, equipment, and toys that you need to haul. Well, our friends at Aluma Trailers, they've got you covered. Their trailers are built by a hardworking team in Bancroft, Iowa, right here in the good old USA. They have models for all of your hauling needs, from ATV and UTV trailers to snowmobile, motorcycle, car trailers. And, well, basically, if you need to haul it, they have a trailer to tow it. Trust me when I say that Aluma Trailers tow gear like a dream. Their trailers are constructed out of lightweight, strong, corrosion-resistant aluminum, and they are 100% maintenance-free. Plus, they come with an industry-best 5-year warranty. Visit alumaklm.com to find a trailer that fits your needs. Okay, so this is kind of maybe controversial. I don't know, but this is a listener question that just came in yesterday. And I'm going to read it to you guys now because it kind of is going to dig into a little bit of what we've been talking about. You guys okay if I read this? All right, here it comes. I know you hunt in western Minnesota, and I do too. I used to duck hunt there, having grown up there, but the wetlands are so degraded that they're unattractive to waterfowl in the fall. Lots of reasons. One being no restrictions on tile drainage. Another is the nitrogen loading leads to cattails that are so thick it is very hard to enter some sloughs. This may not matter for pheasants, but I think you would agree that sometimes the cattails are simply too thick to hunt for pheasants. Why does the DNR, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and really all of us tolerate this? Big Ag is a force, but the pushback is pretty tepid. That just came in yesterday. Any
is there a
thoughts
question there? The pushback is tepid.
Well, I guess the question might be, why does the DNR, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and really all of us tolerate this? Question mark.
Yeah, there's a couple things I think we can talk about there. You know, the pressures on the landscape. When you're talking about federal policy, you got to satisfy a whole lot of people. Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot of taxpayers in this country, and they all have a little bit different perspective on what's important to them. And so that's one of the challenges we see. You know, the deer hunters may not want those cattails pulled out of there or thinned out of there because that's a good place for them to winter over. It's a great winter habitat for our pheasants, and it's tough to walk through. That kind of makes it great winter habitat, because if it's hard to walk through, it's blocking the wind and blocking the predators too. And so, you know, it may not be as ideal for waterfowl this year, but we also, the prairie wetland cycles are unique. It might be dry now. That's what's letting those cattails come in. Could rain like crazy for the next 5 years, and those potholes will fill back up. So, you know, it's one of those challenging questions to say, this is what this looks like today, this snapshot in time. And maybe that snapshot's even within a 5-year period that can turn around pretty quickly.
So Big Ag is a force, but the pushback is pretty tepid. That's the comment there that he left with.
So it's interesting. So it's like anything. When you're not part of it, it feels like someone else is doing it, right? It's Big Ag.
Yeah.
But when you talk to an individual landowner, they're living in their world, mm-hmm. and their margins are incredibly small. And instead of having a buffer strip before that wetland, if it's a dry fall, they might go till that up because they might pick up a couple acres in that piece of property. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge that they're managing. It's the challenge of, how do we identify those landowners to say, let's find a way that we can put in a buffer strip? And I think about, and maybe when I talk about the Spirit Lake project, which I think exemplifies where a bunch of folks got together and said, we have a problem here. How can we work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Pheasants Forever, and others to handle the problems at Spirit Lake, which really were...
Is this Spirit Lake, Iowa?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But the runoff that came from ag lands. And I think it's a great example of sometimes things catch up after you haven't you've had to like live it for a while, just think it's easy to just pull out those couple acres and it's not going to have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And then when a couple of years go by and you see either algae bloom or you do see those cattails really move in, is there something that we need to, it's the canary in the coal mines, but I think it's a good project to talk about.
Yeah, and there's a number of different things that are happening in that landscape, from the buffer strips that are along all those streams that enter it, and then at the Howard Vincent Memorial WMA is a Spirit Lake project that drains into that piece of property. And I think we broke, gosh, I can't even think how many pieces of tile were on that piece of property that we broke.
I think if people knew how many miles of drain tile are in America's soil, it would blow their mind. It can wrap around the world several times. That's how many miles of drain tile.
It's a lot. And,
Yep.
think of the aggregate of all of what that tile is doing and what all those unbuffered streams are doing. It's not a surprise a lot of these waterways are impaired.
Yeah. I think our listeners are pretty smart, right? We don't need to tell them that they need habitat to have birds. They're following, they're listening, they get it, right? But it's the person that isn't probably listening to this conversation that has a lot of impact on what's happening on the land, right? So how do we reach them? How does that message get heard, and why should they care enough to do something? I think that's ultimately what we're all trying to do here, right?
Marilyn, you're going to you talked about the canary in the coal mine. You want to talk about the canary in the coal mine there?
Please do.
Well, it's interesting. It's a really tiny canary when you think about monarchs. And it's funny because people come to us now and say, can you guys think about monarchs? And we're like, that's old news for us. We've been thinking about monarchs
for 20 years.
Yeah.
Pollinators.
Right.
And when the announcement came out in December that there's a listing, you have 90 days to comment, and what's going to happen to landowners, how are people thinking about it, and how do we impact that? Geez, I mean, that's like every place in the country. We have to think about that,
right?
Not just that big landowner, but it's everybody. And this is the part where you can make a difference. So if you have a backyard, you have a quarter section, a playground in your community school, we can all have an impact. And that's that personal responsibility that we teach that I think will help open people's eyes. So for someone that isn't a hunter, they can connect to, well, geez, 3 out of 4 bites of food I eat are pollinated by a pollinator.
Right.
So mostly bees, but monarchs play a space in there as well. And if we don't address that, well, I don't know anybody that's willing to start giving up eating. We have to address the entire environment. And monarchs are exemplifying how we can all have some accountability in that. And I think in a lot of ways, we've planted over 1 billion seeds of milkweed.
1.3 billion seeds of milkweed.
And
when you say we, you mean your organization?
Pheasants Forever.
Yeah.
Really?
1.3 billion with a B.
Since when? Since you've been keeping track?
Since we've been keeping track, right?
I think
Over the 40 years.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I think it's the last decade.
I think it's the last decade. And wasn't it 300,000 acres almost?
Yep.
Of acres of pollinator.
Monarch,
yeah.
And that's mixed from public and private lands, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you go back to that bird hunter that emailed you, and it's like big eggs, got a big voice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, bird hunters should use their voice more too. Right now, Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, we got maybe market penetration of roughly 10% of bird hunters that are actually members. 10%. Big ag, I bet you every farmer, every rancher is pretty connected to, Corn Growers Association. So, and they use that very well. For the emailer and everybody listening, we'd love for you to raise your voice. Contact your senator, your 2 senators and your U.S. representative and say, we do need a farm bill. We need to raise the cap on the farm bill. We need to get nitrogen out of our cattail sloughs. We need you, if you're listening and you're not a member, we need you to join, get in the game. We all go to these places, the fields and the forests, to get away. Can't do that anymore.
Right.
You gotta get engaged if you want this stuff to perpetuate.
I sometimes wonder, we talk about the margins being so slim on the land for farmers, and I sometimes wonder, guys, and talk me off the cliff here, but are we in a lifestyle of luxury that we are living in? Our generation, we've never had it so good. We've never had it so good. You can press a button and food shows up on your front door. Really, you can on your phone. And you've got a computer everywhere you go. Luxuries all around. At some point, somebody has to make a decision for themselves that I'm going to sacrifice that $80,000 vehicle to not need to have my margins so tight, or that vacation, or whatever it might be. And I'm not trying to tell anybody how to live their life or what to do, but I think we are all just living in a world of such comfort that to keep this comfort, we have to those margins just remain so tight.
An illustration of that is COVID, right? When the world goes into a pandemic, where did we all go?
Oh, yeah.
Outdoors.
Yeah.
Mother
totally.
Nature.
I know. I mean, and that's the
yet
thing.
we forgot it. Like 2 years passed, and it's like, we take it for granted.
Our listeners haven't.
No.
We're all in this together.
But society has.
If somebody is listening to us talk about the state of our favorite habitat organization in the middle of February when hunting season is over, they're committed, right? If they're going to go to Kansas City in a couple weeks and there's going to be thousands of bird hunters and dog lovers there, they're committed. But we're a fraction of this American soil that we get to influence and affect. And it has to go outside of our reach, right?
Well,
we're doing great things here. You guys are doing great things. The conservation organizations are doing great things, but we're only a fraction of the people using it.
Exactly. And that's, I think, the frustrating thing for me. And believe me, my friends that aren't members get lectured a lot about this because, Bob knows we tried long and hard to think about this little phrase. So when I first started volunteering about 32 years ago for the North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association, the lady who was running it, her biggest pet peeve in life people would call up and say, somebody ought to do this. Somebody ought to do that.
You or somebody.
And she'd be like, well, who the hell is somebody?
Yeah.
Who's the oughta? Who's somebody oughta?
Yeah.
And so she'd be like, fine, what part of that do you want to own? And she was great at pulling people in. And I think we have probably been too polite and allowing people to say, somebody ought to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to be a bird hunter, if you're a duck hunter, if you're a mule deer hunter, you have to be part of the solution, not just complaining about the problem. And we have to challenge the people around us to say, no, you don't get to be in denial. You don't get to just point fingers. You have to be part of the solution, which is one of the reasons that, and one of the things that we maybe skipped over was that Ron's team added a state government affairs person this year because the people care about what's closest to them the most.
Sure.
DC feels too far away. We feel too helpless. We can't change anything about it, but they want to know what's happening in their state capital. Yeah. And if you haven't listened to Bob's most recent podcast with Susanna Englevich, who is our new state government affairs person, it's wonderful to hear somebody that's standing in that role, who's an active bird hunter, who's an active ice fisherman or person, and she's a deer hunter, and she is so invested in this process. And she's trying to help find solutions in state houses. So when you think about Kansans for Conservation that are trying to raise state dollars that are allocated to funding, get involved. If it isn't in DC because you aren't a farmer and you don't care about the farm bill, well, you should care if you're a bird hunter. But think about what's happening in your state house. Every one of us owns responsibility. Just like you need to vote, you need to be engaged.
Right.
There's my lecture. Sorry.
There it is. That's good.
Somebody oughta.
Somebody oughta.
Somebody oughta.
And we are talking to you.
You hear a lot of they are doing this. They. And I always ask people, like my dad and I, we get into this all the time. And I go, who is they? Who are they? What And so, yeah, exactly. It's a really good point. Let's bring this. We're flying through time here, guys. And I have 100 different directions my brain is wanting to take us right now, but I want to be mindful of everybody's time here. So let's take us to the health of the organization. Let's look at chapters. Are we Are we maintaining status quo? Are we losing chapters in America? Are we gaining chapters? Where do we stand nationwide on chapters? Let's do Pheasants Forever, and we know Quail Forever is growing because it's still young. But let's go right into Pheasants Forever chapters, Marilyn.
Well, I'd have to actually dig into the data how they're broken out, but we are growing, and our Quail Forever chapters are growing faster. I think we added 22 chapters last year.
Sounds right.
And we're at 740 plus across the country. Our chapters are growing.
Of all chapters.
Of all
Pheasant and
chapters
quail.
together.
Quail and pheasant.
And I think quail is over 200.
Right.
Somewhere in there, 220, somewhere in there. But a membership absolutely is growing. And in fact, we've pretty much every month we seem to be hitting like
a new record.
a new
I
record.
think it's 155
Yes.
right now.
Okay.
Yeah. And which is fantastic. So from a health perspective, the organization, it's probably never been healthier. And part of that is some very focused efforts internally of how we recruit members, how we maintain members. We're investing heavily in information technology, so it's easier for people to join and stay joined. Things that, I was telling someone the other day, like if you invested in a company that had 150,000 members and 600 employees, you wouldn't want to hear that they manage it on paper and Excel spreadsheets, right? Those are some of the things that we're trying to make it so much easier for our
Internal
chapters to
changes.
function so that it's easier to hold events. And those are pain points. We know that. We've done the best we could. We've probably missed a couple of marks along the way, but we've really tried to listen to our chapters. Like, how can we make volunteering easier? Because we want to keep those volunteers, and it's hard. It's hard. Think about how much time you really have to give when you have kids at home, and he's a hockey dad and a dance dad, and you've got a new puppy, and we're all busy, right? So we want to make it what's easiest as we can for our chapter. So we're trying to make some of those internal investments as well.
I'm curious. I get to let my name as a member and like the letters, stickers,
Oh,
and
the return address on
the
that
return,
one?
but like
the stickers.
Yeah, my wife loves that. So
So
she
do
never
I. I
has
wish
to
I
write
don't
our
get 'em
name
anymore.
on a letter but we don't send out a lot of letters anymore. But I'm just thinking of some of the things that I receive in the mail from all the different organizations because I'm a member of a bunch of them. So what works? Does that stuff work? Bob's like, oh yeah, that works.
Do you think we would keep mailing it to you if it didn't
You're
work?
saying you're learning, right?
Yeah.
What are we learning? What works? How do we get more people in here?
Depends on the generation.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So the newest generation is like, just auto renew me. I don't want to hear about it. They don't want. First of all, they don't get mail. They don't really want mail. They don't even have phones other than not a home line. So they want to know like what can I. So maybe there's an app down the road that people can engage with, and social media is by far and away where most of our members really are starting to engage. But it was interesting. I went to the Illinois State meeting and how so many of our older volunteers still appreciated that Upland Events platform that we created for them because they're trying to engage new generations to come in behind them. And they don't want to do it the old school way. They don't want to come in and like, all right, check off your name.
Right.
They want to
QR code, scan that.
Exactly. So that will help bridge to the next generation. So I would tell you that we're kind of in this gap time where we have a lot of our very dedicated chapter leaders that are really trying to hand it off, and we're trying to give those chapters technology and resources so that they can embrace that new generation that doesn't want to do it the old school way. They'd love the fact that they can force out sponsorship advertisements to everyone in the community just through an electronic push. They didn't have that a year ago. So we're learning. But it is funny when you ask about like what works. It's funny. I'll have people that come into me like, I let my membership lapse every year so that I can get the knife. I'm like, how many knives do you need?
Right?
So everyone's a little different too.
Yeah.
But I'd say technology is probably going to be the easiest way for us to reach people in the future.
And it does allow us to create customized experiences, right? Because everybody wants a unique, customized experience and how they relate with a membership organization they care about. 20 years ago, their relationship was go to a banquet once a year and then they get a publication in the mail 5 times a year.
Yeah.
Then they do it again.
Yep.
And then they do it. And then the world's changed. I don't think I want to go to the restaurant. I'm going to do dine dash. Or I'm going to take home the kit, right? Like everybody wants to create their own custom relationship with the organization, and as many different avenues we can create, the different customizations we can have and relationships we can have with our members.
In some way, it's a little bit old school. So when you think about full circle, we started as a volunteer base that was shovel in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then we really transitioned to an organization where people are like, I don't have time for that. So we got funding. We found a way to stand up those teams. And now you have a generation of people who are like, I don't get to play in the dirt any other time. I'd really like to volunteer.
Marilyn, I'm going to jump in and say my favorite Habitat day, anything all year long, was my wife and our 4 kids went to our hands-on Habitat Day for our chapter.
People
and
love it.
It's so great. And there were other kids and other wives and husbands, and I didn't even know them. And I MC our banquet every year, and I didn't see half of them at the banquet. And all of a sudden, all these people are out in the field. And I'm like, who are you? And, like, oh, I went to school with you. It's good to see you. And then all the blah, blah, blah. And we're chopping trees. And I went through so many
and then when
gallons
you go
of
back
gas
and
in a chainsaw.
hunt that property, it means something
I was going to
different.
bring it right back to Rob.
Yeah, buddy.
Hands on the ground, and now you get to go flush that bird out there.
Shoot better than I did, though.
Always. But when that bird comes up, I hunted out there this year too, and I saw it. I was like, man, that's great. And I really hope people do that. Are the chapters equipped to continue doing more and more of those type of outings? And is it nationwide, or is it just that I'm living right here in this little bubble?
No, it is. I think some chapters are more apt to embrace it than others, but I think as they see those success stories, a lot more of them are interested. The other thing is kind of fascinating. So I was at SHOT Show with Bob's corporate partnership team, and I can't tell you how many corporations said, can we get involved in a habitat project somewhere? And so their employees are clamoring for us to find ways to get them. So I think
I actually talked about it as a staff outing here, that we could go do something like that somewhere. I think it'd be cool because when your hands in the dirt and soil and you're working, I mean, you just bond, you just come together.
Exactly.
It's a great idea for any organization that's looking for a team building opportunity. Go and work in the land somewhere. Maybe you have leadership in whatever organization you run, and you're listening to this and you're like, I should do that. Yeah. Or even suggest it to your boss.
So
absolutely.
It's coming up.
Yeah.
Hands-on Habitat Month. It's the entire month of May. So if you go on our website, Pheasants Forever or Quail Forever, underneath the Habitat tab, Hands-on Habitat. If you're part of a chapter, PF or QF, contact your regional rep, and they can help you get it created on the calendar and then invite people to help you. But it's a wonderful way, especially to reach that 20-year-old generation and that wants to get their fingernails dirty.
They want to feel like they're part of the solution, and that's the way they are.
You are. It doesn't always have to be the biggest picture. It's the little things when everybody does it. It builds up to big, humongous things. Does it really depend on the president of the chapter to set this stuff up, or the leader of the chapter? Because you guys aren't looking at, all right, it's May. What are you doing over there, Hennepin County? I see you, I see you, Carver. You're not doing it. Does anybody monitor individual chapters, and hold them accountable?
Our regional reps are pushing chapters. So, to Bob's point, we want to get away from a one touch a year. You're part of the organization, and we'll see you next year for the banquet again. And so we're asking our chapters to do several engagement activities through the course of the year. And this is just one of several opportunities for them to engage their communities. So our reps are pushing chapters to set these things up, to get them out, to have that feeling of creating something, that sort of parental feel of I have some ownership here. But we're driving chapters hard to do that. And to your point earlier, we've got a chapter in Minnesota that partners with Deloitte and puts more than 100 Deloitte employees in the field to do their hands-on habitat events. So
love it.
They're just some really cool partnerships that come up out of that.
That's a great thing. Another brainstorming here. Are we free to brainstorm here, Bob?
Oh, yeah.
Bob and
we'll take all good
Bob
ideas.
let me borrow the Blaze Orange Blazer.
There's 3 of them.
There's 3, yeah. He's got one, I've got one. And when we MC banquets, we bust these things out. And I just feel like every single banquet, everybody wants it. Everybody that comes out.
We could rent it out is what you're thinking?
No, Marilyn. So it's like the Masters green jacket. If you are a elite member, or if you are a life member, perhaps there's a blaze orange blazer for you with a pheasant pin as an option instead of a cooler or whatever it might be. So then other people see, I'm like, where'd you get your, because they always ask me, where'd you get the blazer? And I'm like, Bob St. Pierre's closet. Right? And then they're like, does he have any more? And I was like, no, we're the only two that fit these. He's got yes. So then I just think, we should have more of these. You might, because then you say, oh, if you're a life member of Pheasants Forever, you can get one of these. And then they wear it and they tout it to their banquets. And then their buddy says, where'd you get the blazer? Oh, I'm a life member of Pheasants Forever. If you become one, you can have one too.
Marilyn has a woman's version.
I do.
Yes.
I do.
So, I mean, this is
All
just
right, well.
brainstorming
All
session,
right,
something to think about.
Great idea. I'm sure we'll have just throngs of people looking for orange blazers. But, you know, you never know. The next life member event or next year's Saturday night dinner and Pheasant Fest, it could be a sea of orange.
Well, I'm only
very
saying
bright.
it because of how many people come and ask where I got it, and they want one too. Bob, I know you've gotten the question.
Ryan Bronson has brought that. We used to work at Federal Army. He had the same idea. We got to create these and have it just be like the Masters.
Exactly, the green jacket.
Well,
there it
it
is.
is.
Like, okay, who would actually be? And like two hands come up. Like, well, it's a good idea.
Yeah,
but
maybe, but you could test it. I mean, it's in a beta phase, guys. Okay, let's get
We'll
to
have you guys be on the catalog.
Yeah, we want to sell some.
all right. Okay, let's jump into Pheasant Fest. What's on tap this year? It's in Kansas City, coming up in just a few weeks, and you guys kick it off with a concert for conservation. Who's highlighting this year?
Well, first of all, we got to thank Dave Simonette and Trampled for putting this idea into reality last year. Because without them saying, yeah, we'll give you the friends and family discount, because we've talked about a concert for years. And anybody that's had to book musicians, they're not cheap. And so Trampled, one more thank you to them. They gave us an absolute screaming deal. And we had a proof of concept that helped us generate $100,000 and had a hell of a good time. I mean,
amen to that.
Those guys melted people's faces off.
They were so good, Bob.
They were great.
My favorite part, and Dave had to have been just soaked in his own sweat, but he was jamming up there on stage in the same vest that he wore hunting with us out in the field. Wherever he got that old vest. And it's like a 1974. I mean, it's a jacket, and he's stuffing the birds on the inside. The pouch was on the inside.
It was the original Chief Upland.
Yes, exactly. So he's up there jamming in his blaze orange hunting vest.
It was absolutely awesome. And then this year we found another band that has roots in quail and gave us a very similar, very friendly price to have the concert. And it's Muscadine Bloodline. A lot of folks are like, I've never really heard of them. Well, they kind of blew up right after we signed them. They were Post Malone's opening act in November and December. They're going to be Lainey Wilson's opening act all summer long, which is super cool.
She wails.
They're our signature, our featured act on Thursday night, March 6th. Okay. As we record this, there's 40 seats left. So they might be left by the time this launches, but it'll be.
Big Al over here, he just raised his hand. So there's 4 less seats.
Yeah. So they're kicking, they're the featured act, and we've got Chester Floyd, who opened last year's show. He's going to be the opener again this year. He's from Meat Eater, and he's just phenomenal guy. And talk about a friends and family discount. He's like, yeah, I'll do that again just for the exposure. It was so much fun.
It was fun. They look like they had a good time up there.
So, that one just sets the tone for the entire event. It's really, really fun to put Mary, music, a little bit younger audience, and kick off the show in Kansas City with the concert.
Okay. Then Bird Dog Parade.
Best hour of the year, 11 a.m. Friday. We have the Bird Dog Parade. Why
is it the best hour of the year, Bob?
It's 140 dogs, 42 different breeds. I get to yell, wire-haired pointing griffon! Spanoni Italiano.
When Daisy was the Grand Marshal, did you call her a poinsettia?
I think I did.
I think you did. I did. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so, we kick off the show with back-to-back bangers, really the concert and the parade. And then, the show opens with ribbon cutting, and We got the Path to the Upland stage, the Public Land stage, the Habitat stage, the Quail stage, it's a Bird Dog stage. So there's sessions every half hour for different things that you want to learn. There's 370 some different booths on the floor, from art to seed to John Deere tractors to shotguns and gear, Final Rise and Chief Upland and Hunt Ready, and all of the greatest.
You get to put
products.
your hands on the
You
things
try
that
'em
are
on.
showing up on your feed on Instagram all the time.
Right
You
on.
get to touch them.
And you get to see all the people that are on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yep.
So we got 3 days, from Friday all day Saturday with the big dinner on Saturday night, and then Sunday a couple things happening on Sunday that are cool. We're gonna have a meat and greet, first time at the Shields booth with Cal, Clay, Doug Duran, and Danielle Pruitt.
Nice.
9:30 to
heck of a
10:30. They're all coming and be part of the show, so it's a cool thing to have them involved. And then the Women on the Wing brunch. I think this will be the
Do you lead that, Marilyn?
4th.
Nope.
Nope, not this year.
Nope.
So that's 9:30, and that's got some tickets left
Okay.
as this comes out, but don't wait.
Right.
So it's 3 days, the biggest event in the uplands, and
I always say
it'll be fun.
it's the largest gathering of upland bird hunters in the world, and nobody's been able to prove me wrong yet. So I'm going to continue to call it that. I mean, what could possibly be larger than this gathering?
It's not even. The only thing that is up for debate. So from an upland perspective, no doubt, I think it's the second biggest dog show in the country
After the Westminster.
after the Westminster.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's any other event that has more dogs than this show.
Or more breeds, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess maybe not individual dogs, but breed coverage.
The one thing that I really proved last year, it was in South Dakota, and I was talking to Eric Johansson. And so he's from South Dakota. He's a rancher out there.
Mhm.
And I go, Eric, almost everyone's from out of state. He's like, no way. And I'm like, watch this. And I go, man, where are you from? Pennsylvania. And I was like, where are you from? Oklahoma. And we went I asked 10 people. I only got one South Dakotan out of that. So it just shows how far people we had from Canada to California to Florida to Arizona, Maine, and everywhere in between. I mean, it's great.
It's
great. It's such a cool
Our
gathering.
market penetration would actually be a little bit closer, like 100-mile-an-hour or 100-mile radius.
Yeah.
But that's it. It
It
is
could have
true.
been the 10 random people I picked, but Bob, I'm telling you, 9 out of the 10 were out of staters.
I mean, it is cool because you see that even in the parade. Like, oh yeah, I traveled from Washington State to get here. You know,
exactly.
We probably should also mention that Friday night we tried something a little different this year with the Upland Rally and the Bob White Ball.
Oh yeah, we got 2 events on Friday night. Yep. So we have the Upland Rally, which is the traditional pint night music, and then the Bob White Ball is kind of high end. They're not letting me into this one. It's high end.
No orange jackets.
Oh, you don't get to dance? Meredith isn't coming?
I'm more the pint night guy.
Okay. So
But we do have
Ron is going to be doing the ball then?
He is.
I will be, actually.
Yes.
You
I'll
vote
strike
correct.
you as a ball kind of guy, but
He's going to wear
wouldn't put
tails.
that past you.
tails. Oh, boy.
In a top hat.
So what's the ball? It feels like I'm going to be dancing. Are we dancing at the Bob White Ball?
I haven't
I
heard
don't
of
think there's any
dancing.
dancing. I hope not. I got to brush up on my skill set.
It's a celebration again of the 20th anniversary of Quail Forever. So the folks that are attending are really connected in the quail world. Will Primos is going to be part of that. We're going to hopefully, fingers crossed, have a short film talking about those shotguns. Chris Dorsey from Sporting Classics is the keynote speaker for that. So it's really a celebration of 20 years of quail successes.
Marilyn, what are you looking forward to most at Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic? And then Ron, get ready. It's coming your way next.
All right, I'll get ready.
Yeah. I like to put Marilyn on the spot.
Thanks for that.
Yep.
I actually think the concert was such a transformation last year. I'm really excited to see about that because I think what it did is it changed our attendees through the entire weekend. People came earlier and it changed the inflection of the age of people that came. So I'm really excited to see if that proves true again this year.
Yeah. It's something that somebody pointed out. I don't remember who it was, but there's becoming more things spawning off of just the Friday, Saturday, Sunday show. And then the banquet too. I mean, these are huge things. It's been going on for a while, but like we do have a live podcast with trivia night at a brewery, and what we've heard, and we certainly don't want to take people away from what you guys have planned either, but what we've heard from people that are coming is they like the variety of things they get to choose now, because it's not all centralized in the convention center and then a banquet afterwards. A lot of them are going to go there. I mean, obviously Saturday night sold out, and the music concert is now a Thursday night. And so there's different things to look forward to, different things to participate in, and it keeps kind of changing. And so, yeah, we're doing this like on X. They have their big after party
on Friday night, and BHA is going to hold a pint night gathering on Wednesday night before like the concert even.
Oh, really?
They're, I think still in a planning phase, but yeah, Wednesday night before the show, they're gonna hold an event too.
So lots of things coming up. We'll continue to talk about it. You guys will be talking about it on your podcast as well. I've had you guys in this room, in the Roost, for quite a while now. And there's more questions that I want to get into. I actually had some trivia planned too. Dang it. But I feel like, unless Marilyn gives the okay, that we should do trivia.
Otherwise, I got a 7-month-old puppy at home that needs to get one out.
Right now.
I'm just going to real quick here. I better not. I kind of want to. We have this is a biology thing, and then we're going to
We'll do the best we can.
Okay. We've had one of the least snowiest winters in the last 150 years, roughly. This is a trend that we're seeing, and things are changing out on the landscape. Do you think, and this may be just a short sample size, so we can't really say for sure, but do you think that some of our upland bird species will be filtering into areas where they haven't typically been before? For instance, do you think the quail population might slide further north into Minnesota? Do we have the habitat for them? May we see more pheasants further north than we had seen before, just because winters aren't as severe? I don't have any information to say that they are, but do you guys look at weather trends that we're seeing the last few years and say, we may see more birds, we may see less birds, we may see them in different places than before?
So that happens every year. Every year, bird populations at the fringes move up and they move back, and they blink in and they blink out. I had a good friend that had a ranch by Gregory, South Dakota, and bobwhite quail would be in there about once every 4 years. So that's a long ways from where you would define as the core of, or even the boundary of bobwhite habitat. So that happens every year. When you get mild winters, when you get favorable habitat conditions, birds will stretch out, and they migrate out from their, like, it's a terrible word, they move out from their core habitats.
Their range extends.
Yep. Yeah. And then you get a bad winter, and it chokes them back into the places where they've been successful, because there's good winter habitat and good food sources and good nesting habitats in subsequent years. So yes, you'll see some birds move into some different territories. The bigger key is just whether that habitat's there or not. If they don't have a place to go, they're not going to expand their range at all.
Let me make a statement and see if you think it's true. It's more apt for pheasants to expand their range than it is for bobwhite quail, because in my statement, like, I think about pheasants moving towards Hinckley and Detroit Lakes,
Minnesota here.
Yeah, yep. They can. If they find the right habitat, they can get through tougher winters.
They're tough birds, for
whereas
sure.
Quail, trying to expand to the north, one snowstorm and poof, they can get really annihilated.
Yeah, I mean, the problem you run into, Bob, with that northern boundary is there's a tree boundary there, and you hit a forest. And when you get into forest habitat instead of grassland habitat, you don't have pheasants that are going to move into those. So yeah, I mean, they can take advantage of those grassland habitats that are further north where they aren't now or historically haven't been, but they are going to run into a forest boundary at some point, and that's an impenetrable boundary that's going to stop a population of birds.
All right, we'll end it right there. 20-year celebration, Quail Forever, the largest, we're going to call it the fastest growing conservation organization in America, because we can. Nobody's in here going to tell me otherwise. So there. Pheasant Fest coming up. We appreciate you guys taking the time today. All three of you, the big shots.
We appreciate you.
Minus James.
Yeah.
Minus
He's
the
managing
hardest-
the shop.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of times when our team is out there and they're on the golf course and hanging out with their partners, and I'm over here. I'm the grunt. I always say I'm the one getting her done over here. Big Al over there behind the camera. You get the credit too. We can't do what we do without our partners and without our sponsors that keep us on the air and to keep our mission and supporting you guys too. So none of it works if the people that are listening right now aren't passionate about it. So we appreciate all of our listeners and now viewers too on the video side of it as well. All three of us will see you in Kansas City in just a couple weeks at Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic. Thank you once again.